I'm gonna personally shoot that paper-hanging son of a bitch!
Behind the roaring tanks and the thunder of George C. Scott's voice, Patton hides a minefield of secrets most fans have never heard. From near-canceled scenes and furious generals to real military involvement and Oscar night rebellion, the making of this 1970 classic was its own kind of battle. Get ready to march through the chaos, the controversy, and the unbelievable stories buried beneath the medals. Because these are 20 weird facts about Patton most fans won't believe. Fact 1. The opening speech that nearly got cut. The film's unforgettable opening, George C. Scott standing before a giant American flag, delivering that thunderous monologue, almost never made it to the screen. Studio executives were terrified that the profanity and aggressive tone would turn audiences away. But director Franklin J. Schaffner refused to back down, and Francis Ford Coppola fought to keep the speech intact, insisting it was essential to understanding Patton. Every word came from the general's real-life addresses, and Scott memorized them with military precision, waiting until the last possible moment to perform in full uniform. The result was pure electricity. The speech set the perfect tone, introducing Patton as both heroic and ruthless, captivating audiences from the first frame. What the studio feared would ruin the movie instead defined it. Today, that monologue stands as one of the most powerful openings in film history, bold, unapologetic, and utterly unforgettable. Fact 2. The role, George C. Scott, almost refused. George C. Scott didn't want to play Patton. He disliked biographical roles and feared being boxed into one character. The studio even approached Burt Lancaster, Rod Steiger, and John Wayne before coming back to him. But after reading Coppola's script, Scott realized Patton wasn't just a war movie. It was a portrait of obsession. He agreed to do it, but only if he could show Patton's flaws, not glorify him. That choice changed everything. The role Scott nearly turned down became the one that defined his career and made film history. Fact 3. Coppola's unfilmable script. Before The Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola was fired from Patton. Fox executives thought his script was too psychological. They wanted a simple war story. He was removed and never expected credit. But producer Frank McCarthy fought to keep his name, knowing Coppola's version gave the film its depth. The result? An Oscar-winning screenplay that turned a war epic into a character study. Ironically, Coppola wasn't even there to accept the award. The studio once called his script unfilmable. History proved them very wrong. Fact 4. Patton's family was outraged. Patton's relatives hated the film. They said it made him look reckless instead of brilliant, and were especially angered by the slap scene, which they felt dishonored his memory. Producer Frank McCarthy defended the portrayal, saying, "The film wasn't meant as praise. It was meant as truth." The studio stood firm, and history did too. Despite the family's protests, George C. Scott's performance became the image of Patton the world remembers. Fact 5. The Oscar he refused. When George C. Scott won Best Actor for Patton in 1971, he made history by refusing it. He called the Oscars a meat parade and hated the idea of actors competing. The Academy gave him the award anyway, but he sent it back. His defiance shocked Hollywood and cemented his reputation as a rebel. Scott didn't want trophies, he wanted truth, and the Oscar he rejected became as legendary as the performance that earned it. Fact 6. Spain, the hidden star of the film. Most of Patton was filmed in Spain, which stood in for several European countries. Franco's government provided soldiers, tanks, and planes, saving the production millions. The only rule? Avoid politics. Despite the censorship, filming went smoothly, and the results looked incredibly real. Audiences never guessed it wasn't Europe. Spain became the film's invisible star, giving Patton its epic scale and authenticity. Fact 7. Guided by the real general. Carl Malden had a rare advantage while playing General Omar Bradley. The real man was on set as the film's advisor. Malden studied his speech, posture, and mannerisms under Bradley's close supervision. Bradley demanded accuracy and even corrected parts of the script himself. The result was one of Malden's most authentic performances, his calm presence perfectly balancing George C. Scott's fiery Patton. Fact 8. The tank problem. By 1970, real World War II tanks were hard to find, so the filmmakers turned to the Spanish Army, which loaned them modern M48 Patton tanks. The crew repainted them to look like German panzers. Historians noticed the inaccuracy, but audiences didn't care. The massive battle scenes were unforgettable. Thanks to Spain's help, Patton featured one of the biggest and most impressive tank displays ever filmed. Fact 9. The real Patton was even stranger. The movie only scratches the surface of how eccentric Patton really was. He believed in reincarnation, claiming he'd fought in past lives as a soldier, even as a Roman legionary. He often spoke of destiny guiding him, a belief that made him fearless but also unsettled those around him. The army questioned his stability, but there's no denying it fueled his intensity. In the end, the real Patton was even more extraordinary and unpredictable than the one on screen. Fact 10. Becoming Patton. George C. Scott looked nothing like Patton at first, but the makeup team changed that. Prosthetics reshaped his jaw, his uniforms were perfectly tailored, and every detail, down to the ivory-handled pistols, matched old photos. The transformation was so convincing that veterans said it felt like Patton had returned. Even his family admitted the resemblance was uncanny. It wasn't just makeup, it was total immersion. Fact 11. Patton's Oscar sweep. Patton dominated the 1971 Academy Awards, winning 7 Oscars, including Best Picture, Director, Actor, and Screenplay. Hollywood was stunned. Coppola's once-rejected script was now celebrated, and George C. Scott's refusal of his award only fueled the film's legend. The sweep cemented Patton as one of cinema's greatest war epics, bold, complex, and unforgettable. Fact 12. A surprise hit. No one expected Patton to succeed. War films were thought to be outdated. But it shocked Hollywood, earning over $60 million and becoming one of 1970's biggest hits. The film reignited interest in World War II stories and made Patton a cultural icon. George C. Scott's layered performance and the mix of spectacle and psychology drew massive praise. What started as a gamble became both a blockbuster and a classic, leaving audiences debating whether Patton was a hero or a madman. Fact 13. The producer with Pentagon ties. Producer Frank McCarthy wasn't just from Hollywood. He was a former Assistant Secretary of War. His military background gave Patton unmatched authenticity, helping secure real uniforms, vehicles, and records. McCarthy spent years pushing to make the film, blending realism with drama. For him, Patton wasn't just a movie. It was a mission. His persistence turned it into one of cinema's greatest war epics. Fact 14. George C. Scott terrified the crew. On set, George C. Scott became Patton, barking orders, commanding extras, and shaking the set with his booming voice. Some crew members even stood at attention without thinking. Director Franklin J. Schaffner encouraged the intensity, but it made the atmosphere tense. Many said Scott seemed possessed by Patton. His total immersion was exhausting for everyone, but it's what made his performance unforgettable. Fact 15. The slap that nearly ended his career. The film shows Patton slapping one soldier, but it actually happened twice in Sicily. Both men were suffering from battle fatigue, and Patton accused them of cowardice. When the story broke, outrage erupted. Many wanted him fired, but Eisenhower only reprimanded him, knowing the army still needed him. Producer Frank McCarthy insisted the scene stay in the movie. It became one of Patton's most powerful moments, capturing the general's brilliance and brutality in a single act. Fact 16. Patton's loyal co-star. The real General Patton was inseparable from his bull terrier, Willie, who even followed him into battle. The filmmakers included the dog to reveal Patton's softer side, and George C. Scott quickly bonded with him on set. Willie became more than a prop. He symbolized loyalty and heart, reminding audiences that even the toughest warrior could still love deeply. Fact 17. A different ending. In reality, General Patton died in a car crash, but the film chose a quieter farewell. Director Franklin J. Schaffner ended it with Patton walking his dog, reflecting on the fleeting nature of glory. Historians called it too soft, but audiences found it haunting. The scene turned history into legend, ending not with death, but with meaning. Fact 18. Scott gave it everything. George C. Scott pushed himself to the limit for Patton. He did his own stunts, rode horses in full uniform under the brutal Spanish sun, and rarely rested. At one point, he collapsed from exhaustion but refused to slow down. The toll was real, yet the result was unforgettable. Scott gave Patton everything, even a piece of himself. Fact 19. The Soviets tried to ban it. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union condemned Patton as anti-communist propaganda, banning it across the Eastern Bloc. Ironically, that only made it more popular in the West. The controversy turned the film into a symbol of defiance, proof that, even decades after his death, Patton was still fighting battles on a different front. Fact 20. A movie-turned-military lesson. The U.S. Army used Patton to train officers, studying his leadership, both his genius and his flaws. Some critics said it glorified aggression, but the Army praised its honesty and realism. The film blurred the line between cinema and strategy, turning a movie general into both a model for leadership and a warning about ego. And there you have it, the untold stories behind one of cinema's greatest war epics. From on-set chaos to Cold War controversy, Patton was as fierce and unpredictable behind the camera as the general himself. Now, we want to hear from you. Which of these facts surprised you the most? Or do you know another secret about the making of Patton that deserves to be here? Tell us in the comments below. And if you love discovering hidden stories from legendary films, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because there's a lot more Hollywood history coming your way.